HR stuff, some of the things that we were talking about are a little bit addressed in
Oh,
there.
good, okay. I did know that they were there. I thought they were pretty similar to last year's. Do they seem different?
Well, so there are certain items in the budget that she identified as like a change.
Thank you. How are you, Julia?
Good, how are you?
I'm well, thanks. And you? How are you,
I'm good.
Miss
How are you?
Elizabeth? Right.
I'm still walking on air, really.
I'm sure you are.
Yeah.
I'm sure that you are. You guys all set? How are you? Good to see you, Margaret. They're all set. They're ready to go. Okie dokie. All right. Okay, yeah, we just have technical difficulties. All right, not a problem. We can wait a minute. Okay, how are you, Sue? Good, okay. Righty, what did I do with my, oh, where is my stuff? I think I left my keys in the car. Okay.
Isn't this our cheat sheet?
Thank you. That's the actual agenda. Okay. Okay, folks, we're going to get going here. All right, it being 6 p.m. Thursday, May 4th, 2023, we'll begin tonight's Committee on Ways and Means, and I ask, as we normally do, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We could just ask for a moment of silence for all of those serving in our armed forces around the world and here at stateside, and for all of those who provided to this country the ultimate sacrifice. Thank you. Please have a seat. Okay, we'll start off with a roll call, please. Clerk Sabino.
Councillor Reynolds?
Here.
Councillor Flaherty?
Here.
Councillor Maglio?
Here.
All present?
All right, thank you very much. Okay. We'll take care of a few pieces of administrative business, and first up is the approval of minutes for December 1st, 2022 and December 6th, 2022. Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So this evening, there is no old business, but for new business, we'll be conducting a review of Motion 23025, Mayor, fiscal year 2024 operating budget, or take up any action in relative thereto. We have in front of us all the information, the budget book for fiscal year 2024. We've had an opportunity to review, and we will have many questions this evening and setting the guidelines. And I just wanted to Before we start to take some testimony and your overview, I'd like to just add a few words. 2024 is going to be a very challenging year for us. Braintree has had some difficult financial years, not just in the last 3 or 4 years, but we've struggled as a community for the last decade for revenue generation. And some of the indicators and the statistics have shown us that Braintree has, year over year, over the last 8 out of 10 years, we have had negative growth year over year. And that's indicative in the challenges that we have in the budgets, and particularly COVID acted as a, shall we say, exacerbated an already difficult situation that the town of Braintree had itself in. With a lack of revenues and the growth of expenses year over year, there has been some tough decisions that have had to be made by the administration and reviewed by the council. Some of those have not been popular. Some of them have been necessary. But I think this year's challenges, in which the mayor and his staff have undertaken, is how can we use what we have and position ourselves best as we move forward beyond 2024, not only just 2024 fiscal year, which will start on July 1st of this year. Part of our concern here also is the, other than just the budget itself, there's the actual operation through the year of expenses that are unexpected, and our ability to be able to address those unexpected expenses has been challenged by a low free cash, or rainy day fund as some refer it to. The free cash is not only there to avail itself for emergencies and for us to be able to address capital needs from time to time, but it's also there to bolster our financial strength and our ability to borrow money, our bond rating. And we've seen that our bond rating has gone down this year from a AA plus to a AA with a negative outlook. Free cash has a lot to do with that. And that is a challenge. It's very much a challenge. And one of the things that has also made it difficult this year is the fact that we are still looking at an unclear picture of how 23 will end up playing its way out for us and our expenses. We do know that it's anticipated that we'll be receiving a second supplemental budget. The funding of that, we don't have any insight into that as of yet. If, you know, that is a determining factor, I think, in the bigger picture. Capital plan was just recently approved this past Tuesday evening. So as we move forward, the free cash, I know, is going to be, there's a significant amount of free cash that will be used to help balance this year's, or the upcoming year's operating budget. So we will keep an eye on that as well. So with that as a backdrop, we will be doing an even more extensive review and of questions, and we ask you to bear with us, and we will be patient in our listening skills. So it's just, I guess, a way of leveling expectations here, that this is a very, very serious exercise that we need to undertake. And so we do appreciate Margaret LaForest, your first year here. You've only been on board for a few weeks. I've heard some very good things, and we will have a good opportunity over this next 3 weeks for conversation back and forth, and I'm sure we'll all learn a little bit more than what we know. And hopefully we'll be able to paint a clearer picture of what our challenges are as we move forward. So with that, are there any opening comments in that same nature from any of the committee members at this time? No? Yes, Councilor Flaherty.
I would just like to thank the department directors who have taken a great deal of time to prepare summaries for us and to answer questions. And I know that
that can be tiresome to explain to people who don't have that specialized expertise that you do in your department, but it's a really important process. We do take it very seriously, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you. And welcome once again, Ms. LaForest, your first Ways and Means Budget Review. And thank you for the attendance of Finance Director Spellman. We appreciate that. We also have with us the Council's Town Auditor, or the Town Auditor, Sean McGoldrick from CLA. And Sean, if you would please introduce your new team member, if you would.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Reynolds. We have Matt McCullough here with us. He's a senior at our firm and excited to get his feet wet here in Braintree.
Excellent. Well, welcome, Matt. We appreciate you being here this evening. And so, Ms. LaForest, our Chief of Staff, LaForest, pardon me, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's truly an honor to be here on behalf of Mayor Kokoros to present to you our revenue projections for this fiscal year. And I also request your patience as I'm really learning on the fly here. And I am grateful to the department heads as well, and particularly Ed Spellman. I mean, seriously, yeoman's work here on being available to me, answering my questions, helping me get up to speed piece by piece. So I'm definitely spent some time with the density of the blue binder. And my first glance said to Ed, geez, I wish it wasn't welcome to budget review time, because I hope for next year to come before you with a much more user-friendly document that I am more experienced working with. But I am a numbers nerd and am going to be here with you for each of your meetings. I do appreciate very much the time it takes for this Ways and Means Committee. In Quincy, the Finance Committee was a committee of the whole, and so all of us would be here, and the three of you really have stepped up to serve in this role and get through the infamous blue binder in our municipal budget. So we do have a slide deck. You should have these documents prepared before you for the viewing public. This is also available online through the council documents. So here we go. Okay, for those following along in the big blue binder, we are looking at the FY24 Budget General Revenue Fund. This correlates to the page, hold on a second here, I've got my slide 1. Right inside your table of contents, your first page is where you're going to be seeing that. And what here we're looking at is, in this slide here, your revenue, our revenue sources. So property taxes, number 1, it's 69%. State aid in the number 2 slot with 14%. And in the number 3 slot, local receipts, 13%. Those top 3 revenue lines comprise of 96% of our general fund revenues. Excuse me here. As we break down the state aid on the second slide, if you go to tab B, that's the Mass Department of Revenue Division of Labor Services. Local aid estimates is the data there. So let me just flip here along. Slide 2. Okay. Not the easiest to flip and follow along to, even for me. So our top 2 here is 99%. And that is Chapter 70, our school education funding at $20,652,576. In addition, you're going to add that charter tuition there of 1%, giving you 75% in the education spend. And then the second is 24% unrestricted general government aid, $6,761,226. And so just those 2 alone for our state aid is 99% of the state aid revenue. In addition, we have the veterans benefits, state-owned land, and our exemptions, vets, blind, and surviving spouses, and those are those abatements. You're going to be hearing more from our library director this evening. A very small percentage of the budget for our libraries, but truly great public service agencies. Sorry, I'm kind of moving fast through here. Okay. Our state aid offsets and assessments. Again, you're going to see a significant part here. Number one is our, if you're following along in the binder book, on tab B, you're just going to turn to the next page. These numbers, according to Ed, have been based upon the Governor's House 1 budget. So we are using these as estimated numbers at this stage. Our retired teachers, when they are carrying them as active teachers, we are paying their employer portion. When they retire, they go to the state and they're coming into us as an offset. That's 56% of our offset line with $2,774,613. And second, with 19%, is the MBTA at $941,658. The third category here, charter schools, school spending tuition, $502,272 at 10%. And lastly, in the number 4 slot, county tax, $338,000 at $881, and that's 7%. Looking at just those top 4, that's 92% of our offsets in our assessments. Our unrestricted local aid, we just want to look at this as a scale. If you look at 2002, you hit our high water mark, $7,534,173. You then look to our low mark of 2013, $4,490,072. You look at where we stand today and estimates for fiscal year 2024, we're coming back up. We are seeing the trend increasing, but it's bringing us in at $6,761,226, and that's 11% off our high mark of 22 years ago. And so, you know, we all see this number as an area we'd want to see increasing. We had a pretty significant dip. It is on its way back up, but just for historical perspective status, you can see 20 years ago, we're not flatlining our costs in the services that we are delivering. Okay, this is our next slide here on Appendix C, if you turn to page 1. And this is our FY24 local estimated receipts, $20,882,990. We've got some significant percentages of the pie here, leading in with our motor vehicle excise tax at 32%. It's $6,780,090. Next, we have our pilots, our payment in lieu of taxes, $2,512,000 at 12%. And I know that's an area that we have some outstanding questions to the council as to what is the status of our pilot agreements. And I know that's an update, not for this evening, but that we will be discussing likely at one of your future meetings. Charges for services, trash disposals, in the number 3 slide here, licenses and permits. And I have to tell you, as I've been spending time with our department heads, Mary Director McGrath has spent a lot of time with her, and I'm really impressed with how diligent they are. The mayor and I get weekly reports on their permit and fee collections, and you know, it's like they're anticipating when we're going to be receiving, say, the Integra permit, or when, you know, the Tri-Town permit's going to be hitting the books, and they're tracking what to expect relative to those fees. So I'm pretty impressed with the diligence that's going into that, the level of updates and responsiveness, and the work that the department's doing. There's a small band doing a lot of work down there. Our investment income, $1.9 million, is at 9%. As we talk about kind of the hits our local receipts have taken, you're seeing the investment income starting to more return on a stronger basis, where some of our others that have typically had a strong history are slower having their COVID recovery. That would be, of course, led by our hotel motel excise tax in the number 5 slot at 8% with $1,631,000, with not as much related number 6 slot charges for service and trash disposal at 7%, $1.511 thousand, but also affected our local options meals tax at 6%, $1,306,000. So if you're looking at our local estimated receipts, the top 7 that I just reviewed for you is 84% of our receipts. The miscellaneous recurring I was looking at, and the mayor and I had some meetings with the South Shore Plaza relative to public safety, and that public safety agreement is in that miscellaneous recurring line. Okay. Our other financing sources, $5,755,074. If you want to refer to the summary in slide 1 on that table of contents, page, that same page we were on. 74%, of course, our number 1 slot here is our free cash. And I was going to say, Ed and I were reviewing this earlier. He has a spreadsheet for everything, right? So the free cash spreadsheet, $4,254,608. These are your enterprise funds that you'll also be reviewing as part of your diligence, of course. Budget transfer from water sewer at 17%, $994,226. The overlay surplus of $300,000 is 5%, and our budget transfer from golf just shy of $100,000. These enterprise funds, of course, are charging a portion for their use of town services administratively. Okay. FY24 department recommendations. So let's see, in here you're going to see, of course, our number 1 top in our budget spend. Over 50% of the municipal budget is spent on education. We're at $80,263,946, and I know the school committee has approved their budget and sent that over to you as well. In number 2, with 15%, our human resources carrying much of our municipal benefits, $24,533,441. Our public safety, our fire department at 9%, $9,938,558. In the police department, $12,556,599. So clearly the top 4 departments here, or top 5 public works, 7% at $10 million. When you look at those departments, those top 5 departments in our municipality have 74% of the budget spends. You see, percentage-wise, much smaller in much smaller departments, but we have also included here, of course, the town council, the mayor's office, the finance division, law, town clerk, planning and community development, municipal licenses and inspections, the Blue Hills Regional School, elder affairs, and the library, which we'll be reviewing this evening. I will say, as I mentioned too, with spending some time with the building and inspections, each of your departments, have the stress on the human capital is intense, but what an asset the employees of this town are. Truly dedicated, above and beyond. Really, you've got a small crew, but mighty, and I've been very impressed meeting everybody, working with everybody, and the diligence that they provide this community day in and day out. I am going to be at each and every one of the Ways and Means meetings. I have a lot of your questions that I'm really going to be heavily rely at this time on Ed Spellman for, as of course, I'm just digesting this along with you, so I probably too will have questions as I'm sitting in the audience here. But with that, that is our kind of overview as to where we are in what's going to be relating on the revenue side of this year's fiscal budget. And with that, I will turn things over to Ed Spellman if you have questions for me, or we can turn things over to Ed Spellman, or at least have him tag team your questions. Thank you,
Great,
Mr.
but
Chairman.
Yes, and before Ed takes over, I just want to clarify again, I'll remind folks, people watching from home, tonight's topics of review will be the fiscal year 2024 revenue forecast overview, followed by human resources proposed budget, and then we'll complete the evening with the library proposed budget.
Great.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
So and then we also have a question from one of the committee members, Councilor Maglio.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just had a quick question when you went through the breakdown of the FY24 local estimated receipts, which is page 6, that pie chart. And you mentioned that security at the South Shore Plaza is part of that miscellaneous recurring $791,000. Do you have a sense of how much of that almost $800,000 comes from?
I'd say probably 90%.
I believe it's 420,000. I don't have the exact percentage of that, but
The number that we're talking about, that we were reviewing, so what it previously was and what we're in discussions for renewal, I'm sorry, 424 was where you were. We were closer to 750 on what we were asking as we move forward.
So it's 420.
420 is the component, budgeted component of the
That's in here.
791 that's in there, correct?
Okay, what would the others be? Is it also security, the others, or it just
No,
happens?
the other two components, one represents federal payment towards retirement. I don't have the exact number. I will get it for you.
That's
And the others are reimbursement from Medicare Part D to the town.
Okay,
And the retirement was the teachers' pensions.
great. Okay, just wanted to get a sense of that. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you very much. Set. Mr. Spellman, the floor is yours. Oh, did you have
Thank
a
you,
question?
Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, pardon me, Director Spellman. We did have one other question.
Sure.
I'll ask them now. So why isn't Chapter 90 funding included in the state aid?
Through the chair.
Yes.
The Chapter 90 funding is not. The Chapter 90 funding is the highway component that the town receives in a grant from the state. In the operating budget is Chapter 70, and that's the education aid component. That's the largest of our state aid. So they're two different. Chapter 90 is highway. That's a grant, and roughly $988,000 a year. And the Chapter 70 is the education aid we receive, and that's part of our general fund budget here.
So then correct me if I'm wrong, the process is different with Chapter 70 funding. The full allotment is awarded to the schools, and the schools use it as they please rather than applying for it project by project up to a particular allotment set by the state, as Chapter 90 is.
Chapter 90 is specifically for roads. The process for that funding is that the allotment is given to the community. The community would then apply to the Mass Highway for a specific project. It would be reviewed by the state and approved. Then the town would move ahead with the construction through the bidding process, the work, billing, paying, and then they'd submit a reimbursement to Mass Highway for that specific project. The Chapter 70, along with most of the other local aid, comes to the town on a monthly basis. What happens is the gross receipts, they subtract the state assessments, and then town receives the net amount on a monthly basis. It's somewhere in the roughly $1.6 million is the net amount we receive from the Commonwealth on a monthly basis, usually the last day of the month.
Okay, I understand that. And how is a different question. How is the amount of unrestricted local aid calculated for Braintree?
The state has a calculation. I'm not,
It's a formula.
I don't have that exact amount or how it's calculated. But
Well, is it a formula that's applied?
the state has a formula that they
Okay.
apply throughout the state, yes.
Okay, because I noticed that it's higher now than it's been in a while, which is great for us, but its buying power is still less than it once was 20 years ago. So,
Also, the absolute dollar amount that we're receiving is substantially less than we received from the state 20 years ago, also on the chart that,
right.
on page 5, the unrestricted local aid graph. 2002 was the high year for that unrestricted local aid at $7.5 million. And projected for '24, we're up at 6.7 million, but still $800,000 less than the high point for us back in fiscal year 2002.
Has the formula changed? Or has something about the way that the parameters of Braintree are interpreted through the formula changed?
Back in '22, there were budget problems, and they reduced the amount that was given statewide.
So then everybody's graph would look similar?
I believe the numbers are similar,
Okay.
the allocation.
Okay. Thank you. Those are my state aid questions.
Thank you. Okay. So, go right ahead.
Through the chair, I just wanted to make one point on the budget book, and I've handed out 2 examples. The first one is a next year budget comparison, and I've selected, because it's the first department, the town council. This lists the line items of the town council's budget. The first line, administration, on the far right column, you'll see a projection, $79,223. That would be the salary for the staff. And on the second attachment, noted L1, you'd see the line item there with the administrative salary of the $79,223. The next line, you'll see an elected officials line, $47,500. If you go to L1, you'll see the total there, the $47,500. That's a summary of the 9 elected officials, the $7,500 for the president, and then $5,000 for the other 8. That totals the $47,500, and that number flows into the budget to the second line there on page F1. And all of that information for all of the town departments in the general fund in section F1 and L1. And for the enterprise funds, the water sewer is behind the line items for the water sewer. And the golf and the stormwater, the salary detail is also behind the line item details in the appendix. Appendix G for the water sewer, Appendix H for the golf, and Appendix I for the stormwater, so that you have the detailed line items that support the line item total and the line item budget ahead of it. And I just wanted to walk through that because there was a question earlier on that, so.
I'm sorry.
Ed and I, that was to our comments earlier, right? How difficult it is as you're looking at each department's budget to then like, whoop, flip the binder, get your salary line. And if there's an opportunity, and you know, Munis is a clunky software, but there is probably some opportunities next year. I had heard from your request last year about having that materials together. So of course, we're coming in up against the clock here, but I think there is opportunity, to your point, about a more user-friendly model, so that's easier to connect versus flipping.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that.
It's a lot.
Yeah?
That was the one
That was
comment
your
I
only
had.
comment?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'd like to focus first for the committee is on the projected revenues. And if there are any questions, Councilor Flaherty.
Certainly. When I look at the projected revenues, one of the things I notice is that we have proposed $850,000 for new growth, which is the same sum that we proposed last year, but we didn't hit that target this year. So I'm looking for some reassurance on why we think that this number can be met this year.
The new growth numbers that we use have been based on, we look at a 5 and 10-year average. The 5-year average is still in that 850 range. Of the last 15 years that I've prepared the budget, of the 15 years, 13 of the 15 have come in higher than our budgeted 5-year average. 2 years this year and one, I think it was 2009, but don't hold me to it, was the other year that, again, we're using a 5-year average. It's worked for us in the past, most of the time, and I can't guarantee we'll hit it, but again, we're using a logical 5-year, the most recent 5-year, past 5 years to come up with the average that I've used for this budget.
Is that a standard method for figuring out that target number? Or, because it's a concern that we didn't meet it this year. And it sounds like we're using the same method this year as we did last year, but it didn't work for us last year. So what's going to be different this year?
Last year, we were coming out of COVID. We didn't have a lot of building activity. I see more activity going on today. Again, the 5-year average is what I've used for my 15 years here. And I'll defer to Sean if he has a problem with using that, or.
Thank you, Chairman. You know, I've seen other communities do something similar where it's a 5 or 10-year average. I've also seen other communities specifically talk to the assessor and try to get a more current or up-to-date estimate. I know that's happened in the past with some of my other clients. I'm not saying one's more right than another. I just know that there is concern from this Ways and Means and also the council in terms of new growth in this town not hitting it last year. So, you know, I certainly don't have a crystal ball, and I don't know what has been happening in the town in terms of building. So time will tell.
Recognize Margaret LaForest.
Margaret, yes, recognized.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. You know, I think to Ed's point about COVID, development post-COVID, right? You're seeing a point where interest rates are severely been increasing. You're seeing the building supply costs hit significant increases over the past 24 months. We're starting to see some cost corrections in projects that had been permitted, now maybe ready to come out of the gates across the Commonwealth. So what is in the pipeline for coming online? You know, you had your State of the Town at Integra. That building permit should be arriving any minute. That project is going to be underway. It's a 2-year build-out, right? The Tri-Town Water Treatment Plant is a long-awaited public project, but same thing, breaking ground. So I think you're seeing a pipeline. You're definitely seeing healthy interest in your community. But what projects are going to come forward? I think you're right. There's been a number and some stagnance over the past few years that we're going to be looking at.
Integra project would count towards our new growth, but it was my understanding, and please do correct me if I'm wrong, that town projects would not count towards our new growth. So for example, the Tri-Town Water Plant wouldn't count, nor would the improvements that are slated for the fire headquarters.
Fire headquarters. They don't put that?
That's correct. Those would not,
They don't hit the
they're not
base.
included in the property tax assessment.
Right.
But things like the Allen Street development, that would be coming on. It's currently exempt, and when it's sold and they start the development, that will come onto the tax rolls. Also, the development, what's it, the old lottery building?
Banner Park.
Banner Park, I'm sorry. There's going to be development there.
But
So
they haven't pulled it.
The Allen Street Road it will probably be done because we have grant funding to get that done. Do roads count?
No, not the roads, but the Allen Street building itself, the old Bell electric light plant.
We think that building will be completed this year, so it will be able to be counted to our new growth.
Is there a lag?
The final, It will be closing, I believe, in the fall, and again, it will be developed. I'm not sure it will be counted into the new growth as of 1/1.
Does new growth count when it's completed or when the construction begins?
It's when it's completed.
Okay, so I don't think that there's any chance that Banner Park will be completed. And I mean, maybe Allen Street, but I don't know that for sure. And the roads and the fire department and the Tri-Town water plant don't count. So, I mean, it's a concern because we missed it by, I think, $250,000 this year, which means that we have to find that elsewhere in our budget to cover the difference. I hope that we're more on target this year with the development. The second question I had has to do with the local receipts. So we have a 11.04% increase for local receipts. And that, well, you know, at first glance, that looks a little rosy to me. But I also know that our prior projections were intentionally conservative. So my question is, you know, basically, how do we account for what's the rationale for the 11.04% increase? Is it just that this is a more true estimate rather than a conservative estimate because we are climbing out of the COVID economy?
I could go over the first few with you if you'd like. For motor vehicle excise, the $6.4 million, we believe we're going to exceed that. On Appendix C, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Motor vehicle excise is up about $300,000. The reason for that is the first commitment we received from the Registry of Motor Vehicles for our motor vehicle in February was $300,000 higher than the prior year, and it was based on approximately the same number of bills, so we had a number of new vehicles purchased in this calendar year, 2023, so that's why we had projected an additional increase going forward in '24. The local options meals tax, we're projecting to collect somewhere north of 1.3 million for this year, so that was why we stayed consistent with that. Our local hotel tax is up significantly, and we believe will exceed 1.6 million this year when all is said and done with the fourth quarter coming in. So that's why that number is up over 330,000 from that year. Payment in lieu of taxes, we have several. We have one new agreement with the second billboard that went up on Route 128 off of Wood Road. We're going to receive $100,000 a year for 20 years for that. And I believe there were two existing pilot agreements that had increases for fiscal year '24. One for the landing down at the landing hotel, the landing apartment development down next to the T station. And the other one was Norfolk County. We renegotiated a pilot agreement with the Norfolk County Sheriff's Office for the old hospital site there on Washington Street. There was an increase in that. So those are the increases that come to the 2.5 million for the payment in lieu of taxes. We went up slightly in building permits, again, based on our projections of where we will be for this fiscal year. The 2 million, we went up $100,000 to 2,000,001. Investment income, we had budgeted originally $900,000. In the 6-month revenue summary I had presented to the council, we were at 97% collected there, and we're on track to be in the neighborhood of $2 million for this year. And as you know, the Fed just raised the interest rate another 0.25%. So the interest rates will be increasing going forward from this point and into the next fiscal year. Miscellaneous non-recurring remained the same. Miscellaneous recurring remained the same. Miscellaneous non-recurring, there was $197,088. What that represented was the opioid settlement we received from the state through the federal government. We had taken those funds prior to setting of the tax rate, and we set up a separate opioid fund to be used exclusively for that, and those proceeds came from the state. They're in the 23 budget and not budgeted for 24. A bit long-winded. I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. Can I ask if our town council auditor has an opinion on this, on these projections?
You can. So when I first reviewed it, I know I had sent a couple of questions up to the Chief of Staff and Ed, who have responded. I think for the most part, it makes complete sense in terms of where the projections are. The one concern when I initially looked at it was the investment income, but as Ed mentioned, and I did check Munis today, that through the 12/31 interest posting, which is obviously 6 months, I think it was just shy of the current year projection of 934. I think it was 917. So as long as you have cash on hand and interest rates don't dip, then even though aggressive, it should not be an issue to collect that. The only way it would not hit that, in my opinion, is if interest rates somehow decrease significantly during the year, or you don't have cash on hand to generate that interest from the bank. The only thing I will say, and I know it's a sticking point for some, is the trash fees. Trash fees have not increased in, I think, 12 to 13 years. It has been in a operating deficit where the costs of operating the trash do not get offset by the actual revenue generated. And I understand there are economic pressures and everyone's feeling it from inflation, but 12 years without an increase is a long time. So.
Okay, so just so I can understand how this may play out for the next budget cycle. If this is a little bit more of an aggressive expectation, can we expect less of the actuals to be able to be placed into free cash at the end?
It's a great question. So typically with a lot of communities, you have more wiggle room in your local receipts. So, you know, I don't want to say there's padding, but that is where a lot of places will help generate your free cash. If you conservatively estimate your budget and then your actuals come in higher, that difference helps build your free cash. The closer you get to an actual to budget will negatively impact your free cash generation. So in theory, if your budget is closer to what you actually expect to get, then yes, it will hurt your free cash generation. But that's one side of the way of thinking of it. The other side is you need to help fund your current budget and your current operating, and there are spots here to do so. So, you know, if I were Ed and I was on that side and I had to balance a budget, I would certainly use local receipts to do so versus trying to attempt to generate free cash on the backs of local receipts.
Okay, so you've raised the subject of free cash, and this budget depends on $4.2 million of free cash to be balanced. And so the first question I have regarding that is, can you provide some analysis about the pros and cons of using free cash to balance a budget in the way that we are doing?
Ed, me?
The use of free cash is
Both of you, but
Okay.
starting with Ed.
Sorry. The use of free cash is basically a one-time revenue source. You generally, what you try to do is to match your revenues and expenses, have recurring revenue match your recurring expenses. What we're dealing with here at this year is that we've got a drop in the federal ARPA aid, and then also there was a drop of approximately $2.2 million in federal school ESSER aid, and that $4 million had to be made up somewhere. So what we were doing is using free cash in this fiscal year of roughly $4.2 million to balance a budget without making reductions to the school budget or to town services.
Okay. What's our free cash balance?
It was roughly $8 million.
Roughly 8 million. We're using a little more than half of it, roughly
Correct.
half, in this maneuver to balance the budget, which will leave us roughly 4.
Correct.
Would you characterize that as a stable position for our budget to be in?
Oh, thank you, sorry. I think the GFOA and some of the national rating agencies use a number somewhere between 5 and 15% as a target for free cash or retained earnings. I think GFOA uses that benchmark, and our free cash is comparable to what financial statements show as retained earnings. We're projecting that at the end of this year, we'll be back up somewhere in the $8 million range. We've got several factors that are affecting that. Again, you spoke about the interest income. We had a budgeted number of $900,000. We're projecting somewhere near $2 million. So that alone would be about $1 million increase to free cash. We received for our billboard payment this year when they turned on the second billboard up on Wood Road. We received $1 million, and that's not in this budget, so that's another $1 million that would be added to free cash alone. We're projecting some money from the school ARPA, approximately $1.3 million, and the hotel excise, we're looking at about $300,000 more than we budgeted. And in the past, we've used a benchmark of like 0.5% coming back from expenditure turnbacks. That'd be approximately $750,000. And that would get you to approximately $7.98 million for the end of this year. And there will be other revenue sources and things that come in higher than budgeted. So that's why I'm projecting that we'd end the fiscal year at approximately $8 million again.
Okay, so those are some fairly reliable sources of income to use to replenish our free cash balance. But next year will come, and we won't again have the ARPA, and we also won't have the CARES. Was it the CARES Act money? So we'll hit that again and need to make it up again. Okay.
We'll be looking at, well, the 3 ways to balance a budget: raise revenue, cut expenditures, or a combination of the first 2. And that's what we'd be looking at for next fiscal year, for fiscal '25. Okay. Additional revenue sources from the state, potentially whether we'd receive some more money from the state, Chapter 70 or other direct earmarks from the millionaire's tax that they talk about, generating significant sums of money. If Braintree would receive that could help some of the new development and new growth going on in the community, and then also some of the other areas, and could look at either increasing other fees or other things under the control of the town.
Okay, I'd like to ask our town council auditor if he has any thoughts to add to that analysis.
Sure. I mean, to Ed's points, I mean, spot on for a lot of it. I have not done a forecast in terms of what free cash may be for this next coming year, but obviously if we have a couple $1 million coming in over estimate, then that certainly helps out, in addition to ARPA reimbursements. The fiscal year '23 free cash was artificially inflated due to reimbursements from county ARPA funds. So if you didn't have that, you'd not have as much turnback as you did from the fiscal year '22 budget to help generate that free cash. Also, for the past 6 fiscal years, there's been a combination of one-time revenue sources to help balance your budget of $2 million plus every year, whether it's from town-owned land, free cash, billboard receipts, ARPA, et cetera. So this practice isn't new, and we understand why it's done, because no one wants to cut expenditures, no one wants to cut appropriations for departments or the school children. But I know over the past 3 or 4 years there has been a directive to really, tighten the belt, if you will, and cut down on, I don't want to say unnecessary appropriations, but I think every department's taken a hard look in terms of what they need versus what they want. And that's why some of these budgets are so lean, and that's why certain departments, as Chief of Staff said, are sort of, down to the bone in terms of here's what we have for our staff. Everyone's working hard to produce what they can. I'm sure everyone would like more staff and more help around Town Hall, but until you can reliably count on recurring revenue, it's a challenge. And Braintree's not alone. There's a lot of communities here in Massachusetts who what they can rely on is Prop 2.5. So without that guaranteed revenue, you don't know what you're getting from state aid. Yep, it was up in '24, 100%. Certain places who have less commercial or less meals and hotel tax, their local receipts are, a quarter of what Braintree's are. And they're hoping to get to a certain level. But that increase from, say, $5 million local receipt versus a $20 million local receipt is impactful for the town of Braintree. Can you rely on a 8, 9, 10% increase every year? Probably not. And unfortunately, the tax levy itself is the biggest piece of the pie. So if you're guaranteed 2.5% out of whatever it is, 110 million, that's a significant piece. But if your appropriations are growing at twice that, then you have to make that up through your net state aid, your local receipts, and your other financing sources. And that other financing component is the one that is, I'll call it, not as consistent with the other ones, because you have to pull from these other sources, such as free cash, or in the past, one-time grant funds. So,
Would you characterize, to what extent would you characterize the fiscal soundness of our position if we use $4.2 million of free cash to balance this budget?
Anytime you're using free cash to help fund the operating, you're relying on reserves, right? So in a perfect world, would you have to tap into reserves to help fund an operating budget? No. You would use it to build up your stabilization accounts, use it to help potentially fund capital, things of that nature. So I remember at the end of fiscal year 23's budget, I believe it was Superintendent Lee and I were both terrified of 24. Luckily, to some good fortune, free cash was up through those opera reimbursements, some conservative budgeting, et cetera, where you had free cash to rely on. If that free cash number came in at $5 million last year, I don't know if we'd be sitting here spending $4.2 million of it to balance the budget. So, it's concerning for the long-term viability of the revenue budgets if you have to keep on relying on one-time revenue sources. And I know I sound like a broken record over the past few years, but the numbers are what they are in terms of recurring revenue for the town.
Okay, I'm sure other counselors have questions. I will process what I've heard and come back to you if I have more. Thank you.
Council Flaherty. Council Maglio.
Thank you. So Councilor Flaherty asked a lot of questions that I had on my list, and so I am processing those answers as well. What concerns me, and I guess I need a sense of whether my take is correct or not, but what concerns me is I feel like there's something kind of passive in our approach to how we are developing a budget and how we are looking at what kind of town services, because the difference between what you project and what you bring in, that becomes the free cash. So if we lower what we're projecting, then we have increased free cash, whether that's a false increase or an inflated increase or not. We're still looking at the same general numbers, whether they go into whether our projections are higher, so it's not free cash, or lower. And what worries me is the fact that because we know that dollars don't go as far each year, right? They go less, inflation rises. And so we look at something like the school budget, where it's being, level funded, but level funded is actually higher. And level funded is still the product of pretty severe cuts that were made 2 or 3 years ago. And so what ends up happening is we're making decisions about what we're going to do without, instead of making decisions about what our priorities are. And every time we eliminate a position, every time we trim something that we were previously doing, then we're starting further back the next year when we go to plan. And so those are the kinds of things that are on my mind, that I don't know where to look to see how that's addressed in this budget. One of the things I had requested was a list of all of the fees, and I think this might be it. Appendix C. These are all of the town fees. And it would be good to know, like the trash fee, we know that the trash fee hasn't increased, and yet the cost of trash has increased. Where are those fees that we can actually, that we have a say over, versus where those fees are that they're set by the state? That's one of those areas where there could be, we're down to pennies, looking at pennies, and pennies add up. And so as we're looking through to find the pennies, I'm also looking through to find where's the big idea? Where are the big ideas that are going to impact something like less than $1 million worth of new growth? I mean, that's where we need to have some creativity and innovation. And, if we're getting $1 million from signs and another $1 million from this and another $1 million from that, knowing exactly what those are and seeing them in this budget, I think is really important. Because if we know we're getting $1 million from a sign that's going up, we can replace 3 teachers, possibly. Like, I don't know why that wouldn't be in here. So those are the kinds of things that I'm reacting to based on this great information that you're sharing, and that I'm trying to process and trying to make some sense of.
The local fees that you had requested the information on, I'm in the process of gathering it. I just haven't been able to compile it. I'm working on the budget and getting
Got it.
that to
Yeah,
you.
that's not a criticism.
And the May 1 deadline
Absolutely.
for you. In licenses and permits, there are permit fees, license fees, also some of the other accounts. I think Sean had identified and carved out for me the specific items and areas. I've gone to the departments and compiled the information. I just haven't been able to put it together in a format that would be readily understandable to the council. As far as like the billboard fee, the billboard was not put into this current year budget. We've been talking about the billboard for 3 years. I think there were 2 or 3 different lawsuits at different levels of the court, and we intentionally did not put it in the 23 budget because we just weren't sure if it was going to come at all, and if it came, when it would come. Again, several weeks ago, the billboard was turned on. They came and they made the payment to us. It's in the bank now. It's not in our budgeted revenue, so that if all of the other revenue sources came in on target, this $1 million would or will potentially add to the free cash for June 30, 23.
If I could just comment on Ed's last point there too. So absolutely correct, that $1 million for the billboard, it was tried to be pushed through the budget in fiscal year 19, 20, and 21. And I know at the time everyone, maybe not everyone, certain members didn't like that idea because it was not guaranteed. And here we are in 2024, it's finally coming to fruition. So I'm happy that wasn't in there because it wasn't a guarantee at the time. So I believe that once budgeted revenue had to be replaced at that time with free cash in order to help fund that subsequently. So will it help next year's free cash? Absolutely. But I'm happy to see he's not using it to kind of offset that budget, because I think it's a benefit to the town.
So it wasn't in the FY23 budget, is what we're
Correct.
saying? You're not saying that it wasn't in the 24 budget? So it will be in, and it will be added to, it is in free cash right now?
It's in the bank, it's not budgeted, and it will go into free cash at June 30, 23, and it will not be included in 24 because that $1 million was a one-time payment. What's included in the 24 budget is a $100,000 increase in the payment in lieu of tax regarding the agreement for that. They had agreed to pay $1 million when they turned the power on, and then I believe it's a 20-year agreement with $100,000 a year for the first, it's either 10 or 15 years, forgive me, I don't have the, and then there was an increase in year 16 to 20.
Okay, so that million then is part of what will be the year-end free cash. So we're looking at 8 million, but it'll really be 9 million, minus the 4.2 million. Or does the 8 million include that million?
The 8 million less the 4.2 million plus the additional items that I had identified, I think will get us back to approximately 8 million.
So then it is in there?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I'm all set, thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right. I do want to note that we did have a schedule this evening for Human Resources at 7 p.m. and followed by Library at 7:30 p.m. And we ask for your indulgence and appreciate your patience. Okay, so there's a lot that's been discussed here, and I do have a lot of questions myself. I'm thinking, before I ask my questions, and just as more or less a survey of my fellow committee members, is that there are a lot of questions that we have on the revenues, and I know I'm going to be asking some requests for some additional information in my line of questioning based on the answers that I get. So I would potentially see us having a second session on this particular topic, and was wondering if any of the committee members, fellow committee members, had any kind of concern about parsing this review. Councilor Flaherty.
Well, it seems like Chief of Staff LaForest and Director Spellman will be with us for most of these meetings. So it seems easy enough to return to questions of revenue at other meetings. I think we have to ensure that it's technically on the agenda, but I don't see a problem with that.
Thank you. Any comments on that? Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Here's a suggestion.
Councilor Flaherty.
Because our directors, HR director and library director are here right now, and they're scheduled to go, would you like to have them do their thing, ask questions of them, and then return to the question of revenue once they're finished so they can be on their way?
I just want to finish my first line of questioning, and I think that's a good suggestion, and I will take that up. So it's a good idea, thank you. And so that's what we will do. So to get matters moving here in my line of questioning as it pertains to general fund revenue and the budget summary. So a few questions. A lot of the topics that I am about to cover have been touched upon by my peers. So first up is the new growth number of 850. So as of certified in the December recap, the number was at 601, 146. So what that illustrates, that what was originally, I'm sorry, let me refer to fiscal year 2023. The originally proposed amount was $850,000. The December certified recap of 23 came in at 601,146, and that's the 250 roughly that Councilor Flaherty had referenced as coming in short. Is there a reason why you don't list the actual numbers here of what the actual number was for this line item?
In the budget that we presented for the past 15 years, we've used as a baseline the original budget for the prior fiscal year, for fiscal '23. So you'll see in that first column, that was the budget that you voted for fiscal year '23. Sean had asked that as one of his questions, and we can look into potentially adding a column to do adjustments to that to get to a final adjusted budget or budget adopted prior to the council, and then have that to be the comparison point going forward for the next fiscal year.
That to me, I mean, if that's been a flaw in our budgeting process, and obviously where we find ourselves in really challenging times, and the numbers are more challenging, they're more meaningful in the sense of, or I should say, the level of confidence that we have in our projections are much more difficult in this environment. You have a comment, Chief of Staff.
Chairman, and again, this is learning on the fly here. The Ways and Means Committee, have you received the current year actuals to date as part of your budget review process? So as you're going through each department and is that a typical part of your Ways and Means process that you do outside of budget review? I guess I was trying to also understand how.
Let me answer that for you. And that's that's a very good question. Very good question, and I know that's one of experience that you have to draw from. This kind of leads me to another comment that I was going to make. I might as well make it right now. Is there are a number of items that we have here that are not posted. When I look down at the when I come and I look at numbers, when we're talking about free cash, for example, we know that the free cash right now, what we have posted, also the numbers that we have, it was referenced by the town auditor, of what we have 916 that's actually currently posted in our investment income, right? $916,000 is what we actually have posted in our investment income. We are looking at a number that's significantly that we would like to see what those numbers are, actual numbers are. When we had asked in the past, Chief of Staff, when we had asked in the past for quarter-end recaps, year-to-date actuals, most often it was, we could not get them, they're not available yet, which we're getting them posted. So what that leads me to is to a, if you will, a repeated reason why there is a delay in asking for numbers that helps this committee and the council track and create and obtain higher levels of confidence of exactly how are we doing, instead of playing a game of catch-up as we enter into the very busy budget season, adding more time and effort on our parts to try to discern where we actually are. What that tells me is that we don't have enough people, or we have single points of failure, all right, if someone is offline for an X amount of time. So that then leads me to say, are we, another question or comment was posed by another member here, are we actually prioritizing where we really need the money? And in this particular case, in a forecasting, a very important forecast exercise for us, which determines our year ahead, that to me is a fundamental area you want to make sure that the numbers are real, we are confident of what those numbers are, we can pull those numbers in an approximate, at least, of where are we. Does that answer your question?
So, yes, so through you, Mr. Chairman, I know that on the expense side, we clearly have the two-year look back, calendar year actuals, and so I don't see that on the revenue side. So just as I'm going through that, so I do understand, and I think to your point, you know, you've got a very small team, right? There's a very small team here at Town Hall doing significant workload, right? So this is, I think to your point, what is it, this team, and they've been putting time in, and, you know, particularly Ed, with every department head, I mean, yeoman's work. So the effort is there, the effort is strong, but the human capital is strained. I mean, that's our true reality that we're working through with. So I said to Adam, shifting my head back to municipal finance and hitting the refresh button myself, and may spend some time skilling up on learning Munis so that I can add some value there.
Okay, well, that is greatly appreciated, and I know,
'Cause
again,
maybe I can just get the
you have
answers,
just
right?
gotten on board, so welcome to, thank you. All
Thank you,
right,
Mr.
so
Chairman.
I hope I answered your question.
You did, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Staying on this page of the projected general revenue, fund revenues and budget summary, we're looking at the local receipts. So that number is reported as an original number of 18,806. Proposed for 2024 is 20,882 and change, which gives us an over $2 million increase, which is being reported as an 11.04 increase. I'm going to go back to the December 22 recap again. The December 22 recap, I believe that number came in as an actual for fiscal year 23 of 19.1 million, which is higher than the proposed, which is a good story in and of itself, that we've got more money. To us, what's really important is accuracy, real numbers that we can speak about. So there wasn't an increase of $2,776,814. It was actually less because we came in at a higher number for 23. Okay? So these are just kind of, this is the level of detail that we look through, and I want to be able to have an accurate picture, right? So Director Spellman, I like your idea. We can go back, you can give us some actuals. Where those actuals exist, they're giving me a truer story, particularly in these uncertain times that we've been traveling through over the last couple of years and experiencing at the municipal level and throughout the economy as a whole. I think that's a more prudent, because of the extraordinary circumstances, again, that we find ourselves in. It's a much more prudent way for us, or at least an additional level of information to give us higher levels of confidence that what we're dealing with here, and when we're determining to make a vote, we actually have that additional information instead of conjecture or just, you know, here's a projected number, but that wasn't actually it. We have a real number. I feel better about the real number, to me. I feel better about the real number. All right. Moving on then to, did I lose my place here? C. Bear with me one moment, I'm sorry. I had it saved. B, C. Here we go. Okay. So tab C, Appendix C. All right. Let's see. So there was a comment made earlier about ideally you'd want to turn money over from your free cash to improve your positions for your reserve and your stabilization accounts. We know our reserves and stabilization accounts in our town have been taking a big hit. Again, one-time fees sources that we've been using to fund this year's budget, last year's budget, the budget before that. And those reserve and stabilization accounts, they serve a very important role. They're at all-time lows. They're at all-time lows. I think they're in 125,000, the last one number I saw. And that was per the Department of Local Services. There was talk about turnbacks as another source of our free cash increase. This past supplement number 1 relied heavily on turnbacks, or money from budgeted fiscal 23 line items that were never filled, positions that were never filled. And one could equate that to, there was a promise of a service delivery and it wasn't delivered. And that is money, that's a significant amount of money that was used to pay for overruns in other areas, particularly the overtime factor from a fire department perspective, which is another kind of challenge the leadership has. okay? And I think that there's an opportunity for creative ideas or more ideas while this budget, excuse me, while the contract, that's just an aside, while this contract is being considered. There is a window of opportunity. There would be, so there is another, I guess, I'm concerned in the level of reliability about that kind of money being available to turn back to increase our free cash next year. Right now, our free cash, we started off with 8.5 million at the start of fiscal 23. That was our certified number. We're using 4.2 million to fund part of this budget. We had used $482,096 in supplemental number 1. That leaves us with a balance of 3.7 million net balance right now. And again, I had mentioned earlier, I'm very concerned about the rating agency's view of the town of Braintree and our ability. There was a comment made by one of my peers, or one of my fellow committee members, saying maybe we need to start budgeting in a more realistic manner. So those are just concerns that I have, and I wanted to put those out there. We're still waiting on supplemental number 2. We don't know what that amount is. I don't know what the funding for that is going to be. We have just under 2 months in the fiscal 23 year to balance our costs, pay for all of our costs. So those are factors I guess I could use as an illustration of it's trying to hit a moving target here. We're trying to make a bet on what our budget actual need is going to be, and we're still not knowing what all the costs are for this year. So I really feel it's important to illustrate that as a challenge for this committee and for the council as a whole. Okay, the investment income, that was just another illustration of we really need to see what those numbers are. Currently posted amounts are only through December. I think there's a good story to tell there where that amount was $916,000. But we don't have what that information is tonight. We don't have it. Or it potentially could be a good story, right? But we don't know what it is. So I can't factor that in my deliberations. Okay, payments in lieu of taxes. So I'm interested, I know, having been on that side of the table, payment in lieu of taxes, projections for sales that you're trying to sell a piece of property, 44 Allen Street being a perfect case, where Ed and I had worked together, putting budgets together in the past, and that was a factor that was on the peripheral, but was still outstanding. There was no certainty on it yet. We had very hearty debates with the administration over that. How well we should use that amount of money. One year it didn't work to our favor, it never materialized, so we had to make that up in another way before the fiscal year ended. So that being said, how many of our payment in lieu of taxes are you factoring in here, these numbers? Are they all signed off payment, the pilot agreements, or are you projecting any part of it that is not one that has been finalized?
They're all agreements.
They're all signed,
And
okay.
the new one is the billboard for fiscal 24.
Terrific.
Would be the first year of the
Okay, that's a
annual
good,
payment.
that's good, that's good. The license and permit projections. I know that the mayor in his State of the Town mentioned quite a high number of projects and from a square footage that was being created. I'd be interested to know what all of those projects are, because I know one, we had a very intense debate in this town back this past summer about a business, Flower Exchange, that could bring us this panacea of funds. It never materialized. It never materialized, and as a result, we went through making a significant change to the largest revenue-generating part of our zoning, highway business. I'm not going to rehash that argument, but it's an example of pie in the sky that never happened, okay? So as a tale of caution, just as a tale of caution. There are some other projects right now that are pending before our planning board. I'd be interested to know whether any of those are being, what level of inclusion any of those projects might be, i.e., the items that are before the planning board right now. You've got down at the old Motel 6 site, controversial project. That is before the planning board. So I don't know what's going to happen with that project. So we have a challenge. We really have a challenge. We have you yourself, Chief of Staff, had mentioned we have a human assets challenge. I agree with you there. And, you know, we've got to find some ways to be able to post numbers in a more readily available fashion for the purposes of all of us to have more discussions. The South Shore Plaza detail agreement. So I'm familiar with it. Has that agreement been signed? It has not been signed.
An updated agreement has not.
Okay.
The discussions are active.
And when is the current agreement end?
I believe it has ended.
I'm sorry?
I believe it has ended.
Do we know when it will end?
It is ended.
It has ended. It has, so right now, okay.
So for this fiscal year coming forward will be a new agreement.
Will be a new agreement, okay.
And we're requesting an increase, I believe about 250 above and beyond what was being asked. They're looking for additional hours as well, and we're looking for some alignment.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you on that one. Okay. So, yes, go right ahead.
I want to answer one other question. You had asked about the license and permits and what they're taking into account and whether they're project specific. And I think that you'll see it's been conservative in their projections to the point of the attitude about the billboard. We've been talking about it for 3 years. It's coming. When is it coming? When is it going to hit? Are we banking on something that, for particularly, let's say, that life science industry, right? Is it coming? When is it coming? When's it going to be built? And so this year I know that the Integra building permit fee payment is about $800,000, and that's going to put us over their projection. So last year, that was not budgeted to hit. It wasn't being banked on. Again, the Tri-Town is the $1.3 million permit fee to come with that project. It's anticipated for the fall, but we're not seeing that $1.3 million increase into that next year's line. So I do not think that was, I think that the attitude is consistent with let's not bank that project-specific funding, right? So we know we have a pipeline that we're anticipating, but as we're projecting our budgets, we're not banking project-specific. Okay, so again, to your point of overpromise, underdeliver, and looking ahead and putting that in, I think that you've seen a consistent approach.
Okay, so the practice would be is that if there's nothing before the planning board, it's like, for example, let's take Integra.
Okay.
Integra has not filed anything with the town of Braintree, correct?
Oh, they've submitted, planning is done, permits approved, but permit not issued. Right, so they've gone through the permitting process, but as far as have we pulled our building permit and submitted that payment, the payment has not hit the books.
So you're saying that the Integra project has already gone before the planning board?
Right?
It has, and
I would
it has been
assume,
approved.
I would assume that that project is completed on the permitting side.
Okay.
I could be wrong. I mean, again, I would have thought.
Well, if I may, just because it's a little unorthodox, I know here in
Okay.
the audience, we don't generally take questions, but we'd like to ask a question. We have
Sure.
the former planning board chair sitting right behind you. And if I may ask her, was that something they've already been before the planning board? Aaron Joyce, President.
I just recall, yep, that project had come through the planning board, and I believe it had also come through on a minor modification for some revisions, but that was probably well over a year ago for the site plan approval.
Thank you. So, thank you. My apologies for having missed that particular. Okay. And that's part of why I would like to, I guess what I should do is I should be asking the planning department for all permanent projects so that we have a better understanding of where we can. I know, having been a member of the planning board, having been sat on that side of the table, now sitting on this side of the table, we try to make sure that we can deal with more of the bird in the hand.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, as I'm trying to figure out here what I need to learn about Braintree, I've spent a lot of time with Melissa. I think to your point about understanding the budget and interpretations, not only for us, not only for your committee as experience, but for the general public to be able to follow along and understand about, the municipal investments. One of the discussions that we're having is for me to understand, hey, what are the public projects? What are the projects? To answering a lot of the counselors' correspondence and questions with my roadshow field trips, right? And then one, so that I may understand that, but two, so we can disseminate it not only for you, but for the public. So there's a lot of, and I know both Councilor Flaherty and Councilor Maglio, I have some outstanding items on that are more kind of long-term answers that I'm like, okay, let me get some time here. But not only are they your questions, they're your constituent questions, and so how we can better articulate that for the public. And so I think that does all tie together, but that's going to take us some time. I think the planning department, however, does a great job, and they have again, another department with a heavy workload, but all of their documents are available for public. But, with Clerk Semino and I were whizzing around the website just the other day, and okay, some of us are savvy web navigators, others, I think we might need some pretty pictures, right? Let me show you what the project is, the visuals are really helpful, and maybe reading plans not so much, right? Some of us can take it down to that level. So that is something you for sure will have my effort on. And again, coming in eager to support each of you, coming in at budget time with the department heads, as you see coming before you, have a lot on their plates. So please be a little patient with that. But for me, that's a project I really hope to bring before you in the coming months.
I hope so. That would be great if it was.
You, myself, and you, Mr. Chairman, need to get that field trip to your district on the books too.
Very good.
Thank you.
Excellent. Yeah, we have a couple that are coming up. One in particular that I'd really like to bring you up to speed on, but that's a conversation offline.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So, what I'd like to do at this point is I'd like to table this discussion on the revenues. There will be an opportunity for us for follow-up. We will have our time to digest this evening's discussion, and we can follow up with emails to you, Chief of Staff LaForest. Thank you on that. And Clerk Semino, we have ample time and opportunity to be able to publicly notice if we're going to cover this topic again. Great, thank you. All right, so that being said, we'll move on then to the next item on our agenda this evening. And as far as the FY24 budget review, first up would be, I think the larger budget is human resources, the smaller one is library. If you don't mind, I think yes, let's go with the library budget first. Thank you, I appreciate that. Right.
Well, I'm glad you recognize that it's the smallest budget.
It is. All right, so the chair recognizes the fine, longtime library director, Ms. Stano, pardon me. So the floor is, I don't know how you'd like to handle this, Chief of Staff, if that's, we'll just go hand it right over to the director.
Please do, Mr. Chairman. Yes.
All right.
Well, thank
Good
you.
evening.
Good evening. So thank you for the opportunity tonight to present the library's FY24 budget. I am Terry Stano, the Library Director. On behalf of the trustees of the Thayer Public Library, I'm pleased to present this proposed budget in the amount of $1,597,811 for library services to the town of Braintree. This budget is based on a 52-week payroll. It meets all the minimum standards of certification in the State Aid to Public Libraries Award Program. Thanks to the town, we've always maintained our certification, even in the worst of times. This is important to mention because not every municipality is as supportive of their library as Braintree has been to us, and we are extremely grateful. The Thayer Public Library provides free access to materials, technology, and programs to enrich the lives of our community members in a welcoming environment. We hope to create an opportunity that will support lifelong learning and, enrich the quality of life of our residents and celebrate all ages and cultures in our community. Recently, I met a library patron in our parking lot, and as we were walking into the building, she and her husband said, "Thank you again for providing the monthly movies." The simple statement is meaningful because it is more than a thank you for the movies. It speaks to the core of what the library provides the residents. The library is not just what we have for people, but what we do for and with people. The library is more than the task of purchasing, processing, and the circulation of materials. Even though these activities are still essential to our existence, it is more important to stress the library is a place where people can connect, gather, and socialize. Libraries bring people together and help build communities. Highlights of the year include a wonderful evening with an award-winning author, Jane Brogan, and other small programs, Coffee with the Authors. We continually work on the grounds to improve the green space we do have around the library, and we're starting to see a positive result in our monthly expense and the changeover of the lights to LED. We worked with the facilities department to convert the Washington Street exit or entrance to automatically open and lock through the bell timing system, which enhances the security of the building at night. We continue to gather information and plan to revitalize the young adult room. And most of all, the staff is incredibly happy to see the library buzzing again with activity. On behalf of the trustees and the staff of the library, I want to thank the town of Braintree and Mayor Kokoris and the town council for its continuing support. I would also like to thank the Board of Library Trustees, who usually are here tonight, but they all had previous commitments. And they advocate for us, they guide and act as liaison to build library services and resources. This year, they've been a tremendous support to the library and to me personally as we continually make challenging decisions about library services. I would like to say thank you to them for all their hard work. Now I can answer any questions you may have on the budget proposal that you have before you.
Thank you very much, Director
You're very
Stano.
welcome.
Thank you. So the first line of questioning, Councilor Flaherty.
Thank you.
Yes.
I don't have 8,000 questions for you, but I
It's all right.
do have 8,000 compliments for you.
Thank you.
Because I think that the library is one of the best resources we have in town. I have made very extensive use of it over time, especially for my children, but even still, it's a place where I can go to focus on the work that I need to do, because I don't have an office at home. So when I do this work, very often, I go to the library. I think the variety of resources has been quietly expanded in a very creative way, and I admire the versatility of your vision for what a library can be, especially with the addition of the Library of Things, which is a very new idea to me. So You do these things without an enormous amount of budgeting. And I know that that takes a lot of dedication and a lot of hard choices, but I think that you are succeeding beautifully, and I congratulate you for that. I did have, one question, and I noticed that your administration positions seem to have dropped.
Yes.
And can you just kind of explain quickly how that came to be?
Sure. So we've had people move on for various reasons. And so my, Jada Maxwell, who was here with me last year, she had been with the library for quite a few years. She was just top notch. She moved on to work in the network. So, libraries are overseen by an OCLN network, and she moved on to a position in the network, which I'm very happy and advocated for her. So we hire someone new, and they started a lower salary. So you will notice that the salaries, have dropped significantly, but due to negotiations and some of the raises, it gets replenished. But we had a significant amount of resignations, retirements, and we are rebuilding that. And it takes a while, but we're getting there, and we've really concentrated on that. So that's why in administration you've seen it's due to someone just moving on and a new person coming up, and we don't start them, at a higher rate. We pretty much start them, step one, unfortunately.
Well, I'm glad you were able to make the new hires, and I think they are very lucky because they are being trained up by some of the finest.
Thank you.
That's all I have.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your wonderful comments.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Maglio.
I would have to echo Councilor Flaherty's comments. I am so proud of our library and the kinds of things that come out of it, both physically as well as virtually on the internet. The opportunities are so welcoming, and they reflect the richness of diversity that is out there, and I feel like they beckon people in and welcome them in so many different ways, in terms of technology, in terms of skills, and you mentioned gathering and connecting and socializing, and there's just so much enrichment that comes out of there, and it makes me so happy when I see these opportunities, and I'm really grateful for your leadership. I can't believe all that happens on $1 million. It's really striking to me. And so I have one question for you that, or actually two questions. One is based on, you mentioned challenging decisions about library services. Is that something that you could tell us a little bit about?
Sure.
Is it like financial, or is it?
It is, the whole picture. It can be financial. Like you said, libraries are experts in doing a lot with very little. And, we've learned to stretch our dollar, and we're very mindful of how we spend it, and there's not a lot of discretionary cash. And we have priorities, and the trustees help build those priorities. The other things, as you know, out in the world, I'm sure you've heard it all in the news, libraries are being attacked. And we get people who come in, let me say, people most likely, most of the time they come in, they love the library. But there are people who come in, and we probably experience it a couple times a month, who are very upset with the materials that we have, come in and harass the staff. So that is very challenging on the staff. It upsets them. So then we have to provide training and guidance and leadership, especially when they love their jobs and want to come in and support the community, and then they get attacked because of something we may have in our collection. Because libraries are for everybody, not just for the majority. They're for everybody, and it's our responsibility to make sure that happens. Other challenges, the library is a public building, and it gets used by everybody, and sometimes it's our most vulnerable, and it's people who come in with addiction issues, people who come in who are homeless, who use our library regularly. and sometimes have to be reminded how to behave. We have to all learn how to set boundaries with them, which can be challenging. And then, you know, with people with addiction, we may be dealing with drug overdoses. I mean, so those things are difficult to maybe hear or to understand that it's in our community, but we do deal with it. And, you know, we usually don't bring it out. It's things that we deal with inside the library and the board, but it is there. And the last year or more, it's really been prevalent. So those are the challenges that we face. So.
Thank you. Well, it sounds like you are certainly providing the leadership to address those and to support your staff. So I really thank you for that.
Yes, you're welcome.
The question I came with, and it's a question about, do you get any grants?
Yes.
Do you write grants in in the library, and do you try to obtain your own?
Yeah, so we get state aid, because that's what, in our budget meets what we call the MAR, which is the municipal appropriation. We get state aid, and that comes, you know, every year. And that money, you know, is from the state. It's given based on, you know, certain criteria. And so we receive that, and Braintree, we've been lucky, we've received a significant amount. And we use that to offset services. We use it to be innovative, you know, things like that to really enhance. We can get grants through, you know, the Mass Board of Library Commissioners. We have to have a strategic plan, which we do, but it's very competitive. So we haven't applied for those in a couple years, but in the past we have. We've gotten a young adult grant, we've gotten a customer service grant, but in the last few years, we haven't. You know, COVID hit, you know, and then it's very competitive. So, you know, we've just concentrated on other things. But yes, we could get grants, and we are writing a new strategic plan, and we're hoping, so we won't make this round to apply for grants, but maybe next year with our strategic plan in place, we'll be able to go for some of those grants.
Okay, so just for some clarification.
Yes.
Thank you for that. So the state aid that you get, you're talking about something very specific that as a library you would apply for? Or are you talking about the money that comes through the town?
No, the library gets its own separate state aid that is kept in it's kept in an account, but it's for library purposes. It doesn't go into the town. And we can use that money however we want, right? Some libraries use it to keep their lights on. We're very lucky that our budget, you know, keeps us operating, right? I don't have to pay for it for lights. This year I may have to use it for the copy machine contract, but, you know, so we use that money in the best interest of the residents of Braintree. So I don't use my operating budget or my supply budget to buy something that's going to enhance a program. That would specifically come out of state aid. I don't have a program budget, so any programs that we put on for the community and we implement, most likely it's coming out of my state aid money. That is given to all libraries. It's sort of an award, that's why it's called like the State Aid Award Program. When you make the MAR, which we do every year, we get state aid every year. If we don't make the MAR, there's serious consequences to not making the MAR. So the state advocate through their through the legislature or whatever to make sure that that line is always funded, and then it goes back to libraries, and then libraries turn it right back into into services. And that's what we also do.
So I'm a little confused, I'm
Yes.
sorry.
That's okay.
So is that state money in this budget? That's part of your
So,
$1.8
No,
million?
no, this budget is just operating. It is just what the town is giving us. It's my operating budget.
Okay.
Then there's a separate account that is for
So that is
state
separate.
aid.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay.
And then I dip into that account to offer programs and services. I mean, it's sometimes very basic things, like we want to buy colored paper so kids can come in and make a spring flower. Well, I'm not going to take that out of my operating budget.
Right.
I'm going to take that out of my state aid money. Some of the library things, some do come out of materials budget, but some come out of my state aid money. The state aid is never used frivolously. It is always to give back to the community. Sometimes we may have to buy a chair out of it, because the staff's chair broke. I'm not going to take that out of my operating budget of people's taxpayers' money. I'm taking that out of my state aid. So it enhances the library's budget where the town would not be able to provide to us. Does that?
It makes sense.
Yes.
So like, about how much money are we talking?
So this year, the library got $68,000.
Okay.
And that has a lot to do, I believe, with, the COVID. Over the years, it's been different amounts. It depends what the state, when the state does their budget and things are cut, that is one of the things that is cut. So but this year, some years they're able to fund it. So this year, for I don't have my FY23 because they still have to put it in because they do a fall and a spring, 2 payments. But in FY22, the library received $68,000. FY21, 62, and 62,598. In FY20, 51,000. So it shows you. So this year, going into FY24, I really don't know yet what we'll receive. That will come when we report to the state. So we do reporting to the state of paperwork that we have to fill out. And that's how they determine if we make them are, and then awards are given.
Okay. So,
That's your FY24
Oh, so
projection.
that's my 24.
Yeah. So if I may, through you, to Mr. Chairman, on slide 2 of the chart that I presented earlier, on slide 2, you'll see the public library line. The projected number is $90,297 on the state aid slide 2. So
The
page
22
3 in the document, but slide, yep.
so then that 68 is part of that state aid?
I think 68 was what she's referring to as FY23.
I'm
and
sorry, right. So it would fall into that, is what you're saying?
We're saying the FY24 projection,
Yeah.
we're carrying a number of $90,297.
Is that my balance or what you think I'm going to get?
You can ask Ed maybe for clarification. We're anticipating that to be your award.
Within the Governor's House 1 budget, the library aid, projected aid number for Braintree would be $90,397. It's included in our gross revenue for state aid, but we back that out. That's the revenue offset. We take that out because those funds, once received, are earmarked and go specifically
To the
into her library state aid account.
So then that is part of what we're projecting, and it's projected to be 90 for FY24?
Correct, it's in the gross number. We take that out, so it's not a component of the general fund budget that you'll be voting on. It's presented here because it's in the totals that they give us. We back it out because we do not include that number in the general fund in the library operating budget account.
Okay, so I don't understand why we don't include that, but I'm going to back out of this because what my question really was, and I'm going to circle around and find out more from my colleagues or from you or anybody, but I'm just curious about the amount. Does anyone at the library have to do or enjoy doing, not have to do, but is there grant writing that happens at the library for additional grant funds through corporations, foundations, other opportunities that come along? And it's not a a gotcha question. I'm just curious if that's part of also someone's work that they need to do or that they like to do.
Yeah, nobody on staff. It would be myself or the assistant director, and we would work with Lorraine. We would
Okay.
work with Lorraine. So, yeah, so we have not done it, in a couple of years.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We would have to, we would do the work. Yeah, yes.
You would do the grant writing if it
Yeah,
was...
we would have to, yes.
Okay.
Yes. We don't have anybody specific. We don't have a grant writer.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we would do it. Yes.
Great. Did you want to say?
No, I think you have a great point. I mean, Lorraine seems to really work well across the department. He has a high success rate. There are grant opportunities. The Institute of Museum and Library Sciences has some funding. You're right, they are competitive. You often find, I'm really impressed with the grants that you have been able to leverage for such a small staff that you have, from what I'm hearing. And, but I think too, that may be some value that I can help support your department with.
So then I would like to kind of challenge that statement a little. So I don't know what the success rate is because I don't know what we actually apply for.
Okay.
And I've asked for what we apply for, but there is no list. So there's no list of what we apply for, what we get, what we don't get. There's a list that's posted on the website, and this is not about the library, this is just in general.
Yeah.
There's a list on the website of some from some fiscal years. I don't know if that's representative or if it's exhaustive. I don't know what it includes, what it excludes. I don't know if you apply for 5 grants and you get 5 grants and you have a 100% success rate, that doesn't really say anything because you may be able to apply for 1,000 grants and only get 15 of them, which is more than the 5, and it's a low success rate, but it could be for millions and millions of dollars. So knowing what those figures are, what those specifics are, what grants are pursued, what grants we're tracking, what grants we're prospecting for every department in the town is something that is a body of work that I have yet to actually get any deeper in, and I would love to be helpful in that area and also see what is happening there.
So Lorraine, just returning for a couple of weeks abroad, I will be catching up with her, and I think to our kind of project overview, the grants that I'm seeing that you've been successful with, in particular around public safety, the police department, the fire department seem to have had.
Oh, I know she's busy.
Yeah, okay.
Oh, trust
So-
me, I know
okay.
she's very busy, and she's very hardworking.
Yes.
But I also know she is one person.
Case in point, right? I mean,
Yes.
I think that's kind of the
She
theme.
is one person.
The theme. We are very blessed to have such dedicated, talented, and it's like, oh, let me see who's doing that, same person.
Well, we could look
right?
at it as being blessed, and that's great, but we
No,
also
with the
need to
talent,
look at
the
it as
talent.
being strategic.
Yeah.
And perhaps that's an investment where we could actually leverage her success into, $4 million maybe gets to stay in free cash based on what kinds of opportunities there are out there.
And I think more so as a part, you're not going to typically see grants that is straight operating dollars, but to the director's point, program specific, project specific. And so then, how much resources do you put in competing for something that's not a guarantee? So it's a tough cycle, but I think you're on the right track.
Like we worked this year, I have to give the credit to Shamila. Shamila did a grant. She wanted to go to a grant for dementia, and I worked with her, and I said, let's do memory kits, so we worked together. Shamila did the work to get the grant, but then we worked with her, which I'm sure she'll talk to you about, of developing the memory kits. They'll stay at the library. We developed them and implemented it, and that was all through a grant that she received for elder services, but we partnered and worked together. So, for the library, we definitely are good partners with people. So, that will, she did the work, but it's going to hit a lot of people because. Yeah. So that's what we look for also. So.
And it's a huge amount of work. So in addition to running a library or running an elder care center or doing all of the things, that's another thing in addition to it, and it's great. It's just, I know it's a lot of work, and I'm trying to get at what is happening in that area too, to be able to look for ways that we can support that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So,
Yes.
so that's it.
No,
Those
it's a
are my
great question.
questions.
Yeah.
And I thank you very much for everything that you and your entire team do all year long.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay, so I have to say, great job. My wife would kill me if I didn't tell you that. She absolutely loves the Braintree Public Library specifically.
I'm glad to hear that.
And she lauds just that everybody is just so helpful. I mean, I agree with her. She gets so much use out of it. We as a family get a lot of use out of it.
Yeah.
And it is a great public asset, and it's been operated in an outstanding fashion for a long time. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's a direct
Thank you.
to you.
Thank you.
All right? Thank you.
Thank you very
All
much.
right, okay.
Much
So,
appreciated.
now we ask the questions.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm looking through all the budget line items, and so my first question would be for, as I mentioned earlier this evening about how we had turnbacks, we took money out of budgets in order to help fund supplemental number one. And I do believe the library had money that they had pulled back, lack of a better term. And I don't recall off the top of my head, and I'm embarrassed that I'm not fully prepared with that exact number. And I'm not going to, I would not expect you to have that exact number off the top of your head. In this particular case, I know a lot of these positions were for, there was copy money, there was copy, not coffee, but copy money. There was gas money, there were other maintenance types of line items that were pulled back. There were positions that were not filled that were pulled back. Did any of those categories, did the money that was taken out of your budget and pulled back, did it come from any of those categories I just mentioned?
So for so as we go into FY24.
This is the FY23 budget.
So FY23, yes, we have 3 positions that are funded but not filled. They're 2 part-time positions and 1 full-time position. They're support staff positions. So they, over a period of time during COVID, people retired and they weren't filled, but they have to be funded in order for me to make my mark, right? And then with the changes, we needed time to reflect, and we weren't open all the hours. Programs were slower coming back on. So to be responsible, to figure out how those positions can be utilized, we've held back a little bit. But we're hoping as we move forward to replace those positions.
Will you be funding them in this budget?
They are funded but unfilled, correct.
So what you funded last year's budget didn't use as the year wore on, but so you're still going to pursue for the fiscal 24 budget to fill those, to fund those positions.
They're funded, yes.
Is there any outlook on your part that you are in a position of having more information to make a better decision on whether or not you'll be filling those positions?
So, we have unions, so if we'd like to get an outreach librarian, maybe we need to discuss with the union, can we take those positions and convert it over to an outreach librarian? So it takes a little work to figure out exactly how best they'd be utilized. And I'd like a little time to be able to do that. And we're doing our strategic plan, and that may be something that we set as a priority. So then it's sitting down, talking with the unions and working that out. If that doesn't happen, then, we go to Plan B. And do we fill the 2 part-time positions? Do we fill all 3 positions? Do we fill the full-time position? So, yeah, I've put a lot of thought into those positions. We're never frivolous. We never just fill them because they open. We look at every aspect, and library services have changed, and departments needed to be reworked, and People have to find enjoyment out of their work life. And if you're filling positions and work has changed and you haven't changed the tasks, then people become disenfranchised and they find it boring. So it's important for us to make sure when we fill positions that they're very meaningful and the work is there. So now we have seen an increase. We worked very hard in implementing programs. We've worked very hard at building up attendance. We've worked very hard at putting out a marketing campaign. And now it's going to take, with the increase of attendance and the increase of programming, more, more help, more staff. So we are getting to the point where, I'll sit down with Human Resources, Chief of Staff, the Mayor's Office, and see if we can get
So
those
you are now,
positions filled.
you find yourself now in a better position with
Yes.
information to be able to
Yes.
make a determination on the need, or where the need is best
Yeah.
used.
Absolutely. The library during COVID, we all want to move on from COVID, but it's important for us to reflect because the library was hit hard. All libraries were hit, everybody was hit hard, right? And we had to learn to do things differently, which I feel my staff did a fantastic job on. But when we opened, which we were one of the first to reopen, we were one of the first to do many things during the pandemic, things that would have taken many years, like digital materials, had a huge increase within 2 years instead of 5 years. Well, when you have a whole department that processes materials, and now you're taking $50,000 out of your budget and you're going to put it into digital, that's $50,000 that won't come in physically. So you have to make sure you take care of your departments that you have now before you increase. So we needed to look at all that, and our programs were very slow, not for adults, but for families to come back. Vaccinations for children took a little longer, things like that. So we are starting to see an increase now. So we didn't, we always need our positions, right? It's important that we have them. I don't want to say that we did without them. We learned to utilize and make significant changes with schedules and with workflow and all the departments in order to maintain the services. But we're getting to a point now where it's important for us to fill them, and how we do that, either getting the 3 back or changing the positions, will be a discussion that
Well, your demonstrated performance over the last few years has shown, or even prior to the COVID, has shown that you do have I have a high level of confidence that you do, you have the ability to forecast, see over the horizon, if you will, and to watch trends and see what that means. So thank you for that explanation on, in response to my question. So there are a few other items here that I do see that are cut from and they're a good amount of cuts.
I can't cut a penny more.
Yeah. Well, no one's asking you to cut anymore. I'm just curious. So extra hours on
Yes.
page 89.
Yes.
This is current topics and titles.
Yes.
Extra hours. What exactly is that? Is that operating hours and then what it would cost?
So extra hours covers, it's a budget that stretches. We don't have any really overtime. So extra hours is the staff work 35 hours a week, and then if someone calls in sick or, there's a hole, which doesn't happen very often, but it can happen for various reasons, then we're open 64 hours a week, 6 days a week. That's a lot of hours with the staff we have, and missing 3 positions. And so we have extra hours to cover the holes that are necessary. So that's what it's used for. But we don't use a significant amount. We made changes to the schedule and change people's scheduling so that we could cover the hours as best we saw. And then, so that's why you know, we don't use a lot of it, and that's why we went down.
Very good. So the determination was that you could live with a 25% decrease in that fund balance amount. Okay, thank you. You've answered my question on that. The next item is the longevity, 42% cut.
That's just people who...
Relied into the more tenured folks
Yes.
who have left.
Yes,
All
yes.
right,
So they
thank
might
you.
have been making the top of the retirement,
Right, and that's
the
correlative.
longevity.
You could correlate that to
Yeah.
the staff
Yeah.
that you have.
And we
Got it.
have a lot of
Perfectly
new staff.
understand.
Yeah.
Now, this one I need some help with because it looks like the description was cut off. This is line item on page 89. Last 6 digits, 558012, library SU, and it's cut off.
Where's that?
It's a 27%, 27.3% cut.
Eyeglasses, hold on. Shift differential, maybe? Let me look, please.
Library.
It's a shift differential.
SU?
Yeah, supplies. That's library
Supplies.
supplies, excuse me.
Okay.
That's library supplies. So that is going to be a challenge,
Okay.
okay? But we do have state aid. So,
As you described in your earlier answer?
yes. So-
Okay, that should be sufficient, thank you. Let's see. Next up is extra hours, I'm assuming, again, that's down 50%. This is page 90 under lifelong learning. This is specific to that program, I'm assuming, same scenario,
yes.
correct?
Yes.
As the
yes.
previous one.
In that program, there's only two, it's our lifelong learning librarians. There's only two of them. So there's, you know, the money's very little.
Terrific. And you have added, as an offset, I guess, to give you some more flexibility, you have an increase of 68.6% on longevity.
Well, that's because they're getting, they're accumulating years.
In that specific program.
Yeah, because there's two of them, and they've been there
Got
a
it.
very long time. So they are inching up to the top of the longevity.
Thank you. And then lastly, these are more, it looks like from an administrator or overhead. Community Commons.
Yes.
The photocopy machine, you did speak about that. Is there a big demand on that from folks who come
So,
in?
you know, the photocopy machine, yeah, so we have, you know, the photocopy machine, I believe this is the contract that the town secures. And usually, I believe every department pays for their own.
Right.
So I just cut it and figured we could take it out of state aid. But I believe in the FY23 budget, not
Okay.
much has been taken out of it. So I imagine they'll catch up by the end of the year.
All right. Okay, thank you. Supplies, again, is down 69%. You did kind of refer a little bit to that and gave me some reference of some of the challenges that you face.
Yes.
From a supplies standpoint. And you've also been very clear in describing how you can mitigate that offset through an increased amount of state aid
Yes.
or through the MARS
Yes.
program.
Yes,
All right,
yes.
so that you've alleviated a
Yeah,
concern there for me.
If I may just make
Yes.
one comment. When we do the MAR, it's a formula. And I tried to keep our budget as close to the MAR as possible. So if it's significantly over, which happens on occasion due to negotiations and cost of living raises, I do make adjustments. Because it's a formula of a 3-year average, I don't ever really want to be significantly over, because it would be difficult to maintain that. So I work my budget, which many of us do, to be as close to the MAR. We just want to make the MAR. It's always important to have extra, right? The extra we get goes back to the residents of Braintree. It's not extra, but it's also important that we keep it lean and we keep it as close to the MAR. So when I get my MAR figure, some years we can decrease in other areas, and then some years we need to increase in other areas to make the MAR. The most important is to make the MAR. That's the priority. And then we figure out where else we need to set priorities. Is it programs? Is it lifelong learning? Is it materials? Things like that. So the two things is making the MAR and materials budget. So you'll always see in the budget a slight increase in our materials. I don't really take that out of state aid. That is something that the town supports, and so I keep it in my budget.
Great. Sounds like you've got some effective techniques to manage that.
Yes.
And just my last question, I appreciate your bearing with me here. Speaking of unions, do you have any outstanding union contracts?
No, the library union has settled.
Great, thank you. That's all that I have for you this evening, so I'll ask my fellow committee members if there's anything additional they would like to ask.
One question.
Council Maglio.
I didn't write it down. What does MAR stand for?
So the MAR is the Municipal Appropriation Requirement. And then there's a formula that we need to follow in order to do
Through
that.
the Mass
Board of
Library
Library
Board
Commissioners. Yes, yes,
Thank you.
yes.
That's all.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Anything, Council Flaherty? All right.
Thank you.
Director Stano, thank you very much
Thank
this evening for being
Thank you
with
very
us.
much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay. And next up on our schedule, the Human Resources Director, Cindy DePina. Come on down. We can have some fun, right? Absolutely. Chief of Staff.
At Town Hall. Cindy's everywhere.
Right, she
She's been
is.
such a great asset and a pleasure to work with.
Terrific. Well, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Director, welcome this evening. Is there anything you'd like to open up with a statement or of any kind?
I would say that the Human Resources Department, much to what has been described by Chief of Staff, we are a lean department. We are certainly not human-heavy, as well as having the veterans agent and the part-time assistant to the veterans agent, who are incredibly dedicated and do a phenomenal job. The HR generalist and the benefits coordinator are amazing. They do a phenomenal job with what they have. The HR department is responsible for hiring and onboarding, offboarding, pre-employment, a lot of the technical things that happen with our non-school, non-Beld employees. But in addition, the Human Resources Department is responsible for the benefits for the entire town. That includes Beld and school, and more than just like health insurance, dental insurance, the life, flex spending, but also the unemployment, the workers' compensation. We handle all of those claims regardless of where they sit. So it is a extremely busy department, and I have only been here now 10 months or so, and I'm looking to leverage a lot of what we do, leverage technology, see where we can streamline, trying to utilize some of the resources that we have to become more efficient. There are a lot of things that we have to be educated on. There are a lot of things we need to stay on top of as far as state statutes and federal regulations, and those are ever changing. So not only myself, but the people in both the Veterans and Human Resources, we have to stay abreast of all those things that are changing, because not doing so could result in large penalties and large failures, and we do not want to be in that position. So you'll see some items in my budget that have increased specifically for memberships and seminars. They're not huge dollar amounts, but because they were so small to begin with, the percentages probably stand out a little bit.
Very good. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, so we'll start with questioning with Councilor Flaherty, please.
Thank you. So I recognize that your budget is largely contractual, and though the sums are not small, they are not really negotiable. But I have a few questions. So you've mentioned pre-employment, and I just don't know what that is.
Sure. So when we hire employees, and it varies, there's a difference between a DOT, Department of Transportation, CDL licensed heavy motor equipment operator, someone like myself. There's all different variations of that. So someone with like a Department of Transportation license has a very different and very significant with the drug screen, the physical, they have to go for a fitness, a lift test. Someone like me would do a pre-employment screen, drug screen, things like that. So pre-employment consists of Corey checks for criminal backgrounds, all of those different things.
Okay, so thank you. That is very clear to me. And pre-employment appears to be up, but hiring, I mean, so can you just explain why it's up? What is the reason why pre-employment is up?
So we have budgeted, there are some changes in pre-employment. Some of it's DOT changes where that's more for active, but we're expecting some increases coming through because the cost of doing all those things, we haven't settled on what that's going to look like yet. We might go out to bid if we're not comfortable with what those are, but everything costs more, and they're looking at increases, and they're proposing increases in some of what they're doing for the physicals or the lift test or the physical abilities and things like that.
Okay, so we pay those costs. They're going up.
Yes.
You're not sure by how much, so you put, maybe a high number there because you want to make sure you're covered. I understand. And then on page 18, what is the health reimbursement and why is that up?
So the health reimbursement account, we have our health insurance, I don't know if anyone's on that, but our health insurance has a deductible, and the deductible is $250 per individual, up to $750 per family. So if you have a family of, 3, 4, or 5, it won't go above $750. But we try to help with that when we recrafted our plan several years back and added that deductible. Part of making that not so painful to our employees and making sure we're still marketable as far as our benefits, we supply individuals with the $250 health reimbursement account card, and family plans get $500. And those numbers are derived from my head count as of March, since the timing of this. So the participants in our plan have gone up slightly, hence the increase in the reimbursement account numbers. So if we were to have folks mid-year transfer to a spouse's plan or a different provider, that would not be as impactful.
Okay, so that's nice. I didn't know that you did that. So those are, very straightforward questions. There was some emailed questions to you, which I am grateful to you for taking the time to answer. And one of those has to do with employer Medicare.
Yes.
So the budget is listed as being only an 8% increase, but in your answer, you explain that that's an error. And that's, that happens. But we're going to fix the error via a supplemental.
Yes, please.
It's a 0.8%. It's 0.8% in the budget increase. And the number we had looked at, we were talking about projecting a 5% increase in the Medicare. The Medicare is basically a 1.45% cost of payroll, and the number should have gone up about 5%. And what happened is, through an error, it did not. So we will be coming back later to address that.
Okay, so then that's a figure that we would anticipate needing to use our free cash to cover, since we're not covering it through this budget?
Correct, either free cash or the 9C reserve. We do have some funds in that could be used for this amount.
So there's 1.5 million that we have to cover, right? No?
No, the difference, the error is approximately 50,000, which may actually decrease a little Eberflow very slightly.
Oh, 50,000.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very great relief to me. Thank you.
Yes.
Oh, well, that's very, very good. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad if you started at 1.5. 50 sounds great.
Yeah, it sure does. The other question has to do with, there's been a decision to freeze FY23 rates for FY24 related to group life medical.
Yes.
Can you talk about that?
Yes. So our health insurance premiums, we have a health trust, and our trust is a healthy fund, as it should be. We're self-insured, we're got stop-loss insurance so that we're covered over a certain amount in claims that come in. We have reinsurance that'll cover it beyond like 200,000, anything above that, the insurance company gives us back those funds. So the trust is at a point where it's almost too robust. So the way we thought best to address this was not only the rate freeze, because our rates with our split compared to the industry, a lot of other municipalities are split. It varies a little from plan to plan, but it's employees. The employer is about 52, depending on which plan you're looking at, and 48 for the employee. And that it's costly, frankly. It's on the high end, comparatively speaking, to other communities. So trying to right that ship a little bit and having the trust at a level where we can do that this time to help level that playing field a little bit and attract folks. I don't want to say that, you know, we can make 80-20 splits work, but we're trying to do something to be a little more competitive and balance the trust with the balance and the competitiveness of the health insurance rates.
Okay. There's been an increase in the drug and alcohol expenditures. Is that because of the new drug and alcohol testing?
It's a combination. The drug and alcohol testing has been added via the collective bargaining agreement to some other unions, as well as the Department of Transportation. It was approximately 30% of a random pool that was required, and the Department of Transportation increased that to approximately a 50% random pool. So the federal regulation requires us to test more of our pool now than it had previously.
Okay. Just out of curiosity, why is that its own line item instead of being merged with pre-employment?
I think that's just how it's been traditionally in the budget. I don't know if there's a specific reason for it.
The pre-employment are for potential employees. This line is for the current employees. The DOT testing is required for existing current employees. The other one is for potential employees that are tested prior to being employed by the town.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Maglio, questions?
I have a couple of questions. So my questions, you mentioned in your opening, every employee other than school and medical.
School and Belt. School and Belt, for onboarding, it's all town employees. We don't onboard school or Belt employees. The school handles
School and
that piece
Belt.
themselves.
Yep.
But we do the benefits for everybody in town, for all town and Belt and school employees,
Okay,
in all benefits.
okay. That's what I wanted to clarify.
Okay.
So all the employees?
Yes.
The fire department?
Everyone.
The police department? The schools?
Yep, teachers,
The
paras,
drivers?
bus drivers.
Transportation? Yep,
Braintree Electric and Light, everybody, as
excellent.
well as workers' comp.
Okay, great. So I'm curious about how our budget could be impacted based on the outstanding contracts that need to be settled.
It's a good question. And we have budgeted we have settled, we now have an agreement that will be coming before council with the fire department. We've settled with the library, utility workers, and we're still at the table with AFSCME, patrol, and Superiors. In a school, the teachers, of course, school.
Can you say that again? I'm sorry, AFSCME?
AFSCME, the police patrol, and then police superiors, because they're separate collective bargaining agreements, as well as school department. So the raises that we have negotiated with the other unions is what we have, if I'm incorrect, please let me know, but what we have budgeted and put aside for these other unions as well.
Okay, thank you. So then, so what happens for FY '24 in terms of the ones that are still pending?
So for the ones that are pending, we have budgeted the equivalent of what we've settled with the other unions. And let's say if something should come in higher, we would have to present, I would imagine, a supplemental budget. I don't, any other, yeah, I'm not sure there's any other avenue to fund something outside of what we've budgeted besides that. Unless some of it could be absorbed. There are maybe smaller units where if they had an unfilled position, they might be able to absorb a fraction of a % or an increase in a certain area. But for the most part, it would be a supplemental request.
Okay, all right. That's all my questions for right now. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Counselor. Okay, so, well, since we're talking about unions, I might as well ask this question now. I anticipate if you were to provide us with a number based on what was projected you were going to be paying out in increases across the various union negotiations, because we do know that the money was set aside last year in anticipation of the union contracts expiring this year, and that most of those union contracts, do they expire in September or August?
July 1.
July 1.
All of them.
All of them.
July
Okay.
1 of '22.
Right. So you've settled with a number of unions already.
Yes.
And without getting into particulars, do you feel as if that you had settled, were the costs that came in per these individual unions you settled, were they on track? Were they below? Were they above? In general?
In general, the ones that we have settled with, and that's public, we've settled with them, their contracts are public information. It was on track within what we have budgeted, and if it was slightly over, we were either able to absorb or present a supplemental that was not a colossal number like $1 million. It was something that was more reasonable.
Okay, thank you. And I can look that up further. Okay, and there was, so thank you for the explanation on the increase on the drug and alcohol testing. Sure. That's a very clear answer. Did I hear you say that there were additional employees who were not subject to drug and alcohol testing that now will be?
Yes, we negotiated it, and with the fire department, it's, again, public, it's in their contract. Not this time. It was settled in I believe, the last contract. And part of rolling that out, we had to find a provider. We had to provide training, make sure everybody was, advised in advance, and we rolled out all the training. So that's something that we're going to be starting now that we've successfully completed or in the process of finishing the last of those steps.
Okay. The 900% increase in meetings and /S, that's been cut off.
Yes. I think that's meetings and seminars.
Okay.
And the dollar figure is, I think it's about $1,800, but the percentage is quite large because it was only a few hundred budgeted previous. And we just have to stay abreast of all the changes. And things have happened rapidly. COVID was a great example. And
terrific. Okay. And I mean, there are some other printing needs, but those numbers are not significant as far as the increases, a large number, but the actual dollar amounts are not that significant.
Right.
So I think I'm satisfied as far as all of the line items here.
Okay.
And I think for the time being, those are the extent of my questions for you. I will ask if there are additional questions at this time from any of the committee members. I have a no. Yes?
Yes.
Council Maglio.
Sorry, I forgot.
No, it's okay.
I looked at my next page. Is there any sort of town-wide performance evaluation process?
So there is, it varies, and the collective bargaining agreement dictates some of those. So we do have systems that vary between the collective bargaining agreements, but most of them are where you check off the range of someone's performance and you write in some goals and objectives and things of that nature. So it's not, one of the things I like to say when I get one is, oh, this is vanilla, you gotta redo it. It can't, if someone is excellent in every category and there's no room for improvement, then we should be putting them somewhere else. We should be finding some place to put them that's advancing them or something like that. So we want to make sure we're engaging our employees and giving them objectives and goals to work towards.
And is that something that happens is that something that it just sort of gets filed in HR and it happens in the departments, or does HR play an active role in that?
So I would say our role isn't as active as it is in some organizations. The department heads, their supervisors, they conduct those with the employees that they deal with one-on-one. Comes to HR, we review it. Some of them come with step increases and things like that because of how long they've been there, things of that nature. And we just make sure that if there's anything that needs our assistance or our attention, that we're supplying that to the department head, the division head, the managers, whatever it might be, the employee, things like that.
Okay.
It doesn't just go in a drawer. We review it and we see what we can do if anything needs to have HR's attention.
Excellent. And does HR make any sort of recommendations around training, investing in our employees?
Yes. So I am presently working.
You need to be in
sorry. I am presently working with our insurance company, which is Maya, the Mass Interlocal Insurance Agency. They have some phenomenal resources. Both they will come to our physical site, but given our population and the 24/7 shifts and things like that, I am working with them right now to get not just some of the mandatory things like harassment prevention and non-discriminatory things. We have them bringing the simulator for the driving. I want to work on preventing some injuries, back injuries, proper lifting. They're willing to send some of their reps out here, and that's not an additional charge, so I'm taking full advantage of that.
Right.
So we can work on that.
It doesn't seem like there's enrichment opportunities in here in the budget, so that's how we're able to bring some supports in for employees. Great.
And that driving simulator is fantastic. I've had an experience in another community where I've got to utilize that. And when you're in a situation that is very unfamiliar to you, like pursuit driving or something like that, it's really puts things into perspective for you.
Okay, thank you.
That's it. Thank you very much. Okay, is there anything further? I'm going to ask the Chief of Staff if she has anything further that she'd like to discuss this evening.
No, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Very good, thank you. We do appreciate your time,
Thank you so
Director
much.
Tapina. We appreciate that time. Okay, so let's see. So at this point, I'd like to entertain a motion to table Order 23025 to our next Ways and Means meeting on May 8th. That's Monday evening.
Motion to table order 23025 to May 8th, 2023. Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
That's unanimous. Thank you again, Chief of Staff LaForest. Thank you so much. Director Spellman, thank you for your time this evening and the effort you've put in. And appreciate the town auditor. Yes. My apologies. So let's,
Order 23027.
do we have to open the meeting up again where we already took the vote?
No, we only tabled that one item, so we have two more items to
Very
table
good.
as well.
Okay, thank you. So from an adjournment standpoint, we are not adjourned. And what did I do with my agenda?
Sorry, just wanted to go over the
The
revolving
agenda.
for
no,
library.
What did I do?
I know
with
she's
my
not here, but if we
agenda?
have further questions, we can just ask
Any
her.
of you have the agenda there?
Motions?
There, this is the sheet.
Okay. Okay.
Revolving accounts discussion?
The one with the caps,
Oh.
Thank you very much. Okay. Focus on this,
and it's the library, the two library items.
Excellent.
and we will have to read all of these motions?
No,
All right.
no, not tonight anyway,
Okay.
eventually.
All right. So,
So tonight, we just want to look at these two revolving, if anybody has any questions.
okay.
We don't need to read it or vote on it, it's just to mention it because library is presenting this evening.
Very good. So, thank you for that explanation, Clerk Semino. All right. My apologies for the premature all right, end of the meeting. All right, so what we have here is, if there is any discussion at this point, there is a motion which we are under consideration, which will be taken at a later time in this process, but it is for the continuation of the revolving funds, specifically the library materials from the library trustees of $45,000 spending limit in fiscal 2024, as well as library room rental, again, from the library trustees for $5,000 on fiscal year 2024 spending limit. So I'd like to ask if there's any questions or concerns for points of discussion that any of the members of the Ways and Means Committee would like to have on these two items. No. Okay, Councilor Flaherty? Nothing from Councilor Maglio, so thank you. All right, so we've had that item discussed. And I think that is all that we have this evening.
We can table that order, 23027.
Motion to table order 23027 to the Ways and Means meeting on May 9th, 2022.
Motion, seconded?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
That
you.
is unanimous.
And one more
One
order
more
to
item.
table, please, just to table 23026 to May 16th.
So that is 23026, Mayor, fiscal year 2024 budget, Community Preservation Committee, or take up any action relative to thereto. The motion is to table that item to May 16th Ways and Means hearing. Do we have a motion?
Motion to table order 23026 to May 16th, 2023.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And I do believe we've taken care of all our business on this evening's agenda. Okay. With that, well, I'll ask one more time, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Officially, we have adjourned. Thank you for your patience, and have a good evening, everybody.